Start the meeting. Roll call. We have Pat. We have Mike Ahern, Chair. Sharon with the town. We have Paul Wilson, Dick Lewis, and John Kelly here. Pat Welch. General public comments. Anything from the public that is not on the agenda. Administrative matters, item number 4. We have a non-binding site plan review presentation and public hearing, governmental use of property on the proposed Plymouth State University Project Museum of the White Mountains on the site of the former Methodist Church on Highland Street. This project is located in both the civic, institutional, and multifamily residential zones. Do you want to say anything before we open up to...
No, I'll have Mr. Taskar and his crew explain it. They were before us, I believe it was May, for kind of a preliminary introductory session. Right. As noted before, this development falls under the auspices of, I've got the wrong piece of paper here, but I think I've looked at it enough times I can quote it, 674:54 of the New Hampshire RSAs. Because it is a non-governmental entity, it's being constructed by Plymouth State University, so different criteria in terms of planning and zoning approvals applies, and the process looks for input and looks for the applicant, so to speak, or the principal to, you know, explain what they're doing and how and why, and would still very much like to engender public participation, but there won't be a formal vote of approval per se, because it's not required under the statute. So, do you have any handouts, Steve? Okay. Perhaps if we could, I don't know, is this a good time to pass those out, or you want to wait till later? Or?
Well, what I'd like to do if we can is we'll have each person give a
Sure,
speech.
sure. It's just kind of the same format as before. No, I would say then just introduce yourself, please, and come up to the mic.
Yep. Thank you for having us back again today. We appreciate the opportunity. As I hope you know, we've been before the board many times before and try to work collaboratively to respond to any concerns and issues, and I hope that's the feeling on your end. We have the same team here today that was here last time, the same players, and so each person will give a 5 or 7, 8 minute kind of overview of their particular perspective and expertise on the project. So after I do my piece, Catherine Amadon who is the director of the Museum of the White Mountains, will give a programmatic overview. Then John Scott will also speak to the site plan and issues there. And Ellen Shippey may have a couple of comments along the way as we get started. So that's sort of the program. We do hope to answer and respond to the questions that came up in our preliminary session last time, so we're prepared to give a little bit more information on that and then start off that way. So let me ask Catherine to come up and start with her presentation.
Good evening, and thank you again for inviting us back to talk about the museum. We're really, as I said before, quite excited about this project. There have been several previous attempts in the region to create a Museum of the White Mountains. None have come to fruition, and to have it here in Plymouth as the gateway to the White Mountains is a real advantage to us as a community in terms of our identity, because historically we are the gateway. People come up often across the lakes, over the land, and head up into the Notch. And so we will be looking at the whole region. We'll be looking at Squam, Holderness, Plymouth, and everything going up into the White Mountains that defines our broader culture. And we've had a wonderful donation of objects and images from Dan Noel, of stereoscopic images, postcards, hotel ledgers, prints. Just last week we received a major donation of paintings by White Mountain women artists, which is a real rarity. We have numerous other donations in the wings that are soon to come our way, that will ensure that we have rich, broad range of collections, including the 6,000 rare books and maps that were recently donated. So we were going to be a site for enjoyment, that is to visit a museum and have a great day with activities for families and kids. We're going to be a center for research because we're going to have archives and images and library about the region. We are going to be a center of virtual activity because everything we do is going to go online. We already have a large portion of our collections online on our website. We have our 5 test exhibitions that we did on campus, plus free standards-based education materials that go with it, plus the catalogs are online for free. So everything that we do, whether you're coming in the door of the museum and being a casual visitor, or going online and downloading a curriculum packet for your 3rd grade class, everything is free and fully accessible. And so we see ourselves, this very much part of our mission to be a comprehensive regional university and to educate. And in addition to that, promote and preserve the heritage of the region. There's a very rich history that grows dimmer with the days when it's not being well preserved. And as we move from phase 1 to phase 2, we'll be moving from an exhibition space and museum to a space that meets American Association of Museum accreditation standards for preservation and storage of artifacts that ensures that our cultural heritage will be preserved in perpetuity. And in addition, we consider this a large partnership project. We are working closely with the New Hampshire Historical Society in Concord, the Jackson Historical Society, the Conway Historical Society, the Mount Washington Observatory. We look at all of our neighboring communities and see how their rich collections can complement ours. So far we've been having this sort of flurry of activity as we move toward our opening, which is going to be the latter part of February of 2013. And following the opening, the first exhibition will be in place for 1 year because we anticipate a high volume of first-time visitors. And during that time, there will be events and programs, lectures. People will be able to get museum tours during that time period. It's also an important educational initiative. We've already had about 10 interns who've worked in the museum and received professional practice and training that they can then take with them on to other jobs in other places. So that is the direction we're moving in, is community-minded, educationally focused, and resourced for preservation and promotion. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
Yep.
At this point, I know it's kind of early, do you have any idea how many days a week and what the hours would be open, roughly?
We're still working. Traditionally, museums try to be open 6 days a week.
Right.
And that's the direction we're looking in, and probably one evening to facilitate visitation
Right.
for the public.
And is there any plans on what the admission's going to be? You guys-
Free and
Oh,
open
it's
to,
gonna-
everything that
oh.
we're doing is going to be free.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to cover a few project highlights and also run you through the basic floor plan in sort of a high level, not in a lot of detail, but just to try to give you a flavor of what the building will look and feel like and what we're trying to achieve with the museum. So I do have a handout, which I've seen before. As Catherine indicated, the museum serves multiple purposes. It's an academic facility. It also, we believe, will be a valuable cultural resource for the community. Embedded in the museum will be a variety of rooms and facilities, including galleries, office space, classrooms, a lecture hall, conference space, and of course we have museum storage space, and that's absolutely critical to a well-functioning museum. As Catherine said, we expect to have a grand opening in February. We hope to finish construction in the fall, and so far it seems to be going pretty well. The museum, as we've envisioned it, is a two-phase museum. In other words, phase one really just gets the building itself and the physical infrastructure in good enough shape to use it as a facility. But it does not get us to a museum quality facility, which means higher quality temperature and humidity controls in the storage area and other places where art will be displayed. But we've thought through this fairly carefully and have a master plan for phase two based on funding that we need to raise to complete the full project. So phase one is simply to get the facility in shape, do most of the build out, not do anything fancy inside per se, but get the structure in good shape and make sure that the pieces that we have constructed in the facility can be added on to later on for phase two, so that we don't have to really do a lot of demolition or retrofitting or any of that. We're simply just be adding on to what's already there. The facility itself, of course, was a church. It was built in 1946 on a little less than half an acre lot. The university purchased it in 2008, and so it has been sitting vacant and unused for quite a few years. And so we're pretty excited to be able to put an underutilized facility back into a good utilization situation. This is really, as Catherine said, the intellectual home for historical artifacts. It also provides hands-on experience for students and interns interested in art history and preservation. As Catherine mentioned, there'll be at least one major exhibit, maybe two a year. And she's also formed an advisory council based on community input and other folks who are interested in White Mountain art to help to continue to develop the museum, help with fundraising, and provide guidance in terms of how the museum unfolds. So that's kind of the quick overview. If I could take a couple of minutes to run you through the facility. I know you can't see it too well here, so I'm just going to hit the highlights. The bottom part here is phase one, which has the basement on this side and the first floor on this side. And just to show you the difference between phase one and the master plan, which is the top piece, essentially the main difference from a structural and infrastructure standpoint is that we would like at some point to add on this part of the building to square it off. So right now it's parking spaces in the back, and ultimately what we'd like to do is square it off and convert that to museum quality storage space with all the proper HVAC systems in place to control the temperature and humidity. We have multiple galleries in the space. The main gallery is on the first floor. There are other galleries that we're going to be using as offices initially until we finish the master plan, so that there'll be office space there, reception area, and we are in this first phase adding a loading dock to the back side of the building so that we can receive deliveries of office supplies, exhibits, and anything else that's needed to run the museum. So, and John will probably talk a little bit about that. In addition to that, we are adding an elevator for ADA purposes and just moving things from floor to floor. So the elevator is an integral part of what we need to do, which will also serve us well in phase two. There's a lot of preparation space and other storage space. The initial collection storage space is in the basement level. That's not ideal if you're trying to preserve artwork. We're spending quite a bit of money on the outside of the building to control water drainage and infiltration into the building, and so we're pretty confident we have a good system to block that. There's some space that we're leaving unfinished in phase one for a couple of reasons. We don't have the full funding to finish it out, and secondly, that converts to teaching space in phase two, so we'll just use it as flex space for now. When we get to phase two, which we can't really predict when that will happen, it's entirely based on fundraising. So as we're more successful at fundraising, we'll make the investment on finishing out the project the way we've envisioned it. Phase one is about a $2 million project. And we believe Phase 2 is about the same, give or take. So overall, it's about a $4 million project for the campus. A lot of things shift around, and I'm probably not going to go through all of that, other than to say that the biggest change is the addition, which I've mentioned. We add 2 more galleries, and the office space goes down to the first floor in the lower level to create basically 3 galleries on the top floor as you come in. There'll be a formal reception area coming off the entrance, and along with what we're calling an interpretive trail, which will be our ADA access. And we're still working out the mechanics of this, but essentially what we want to do is create a trail-like environment that kind of welcomes somebody into the museum as a White Mountains sort of entity. And so there's a series of discussions going on right now with using plantings and landscaping that are natural to the area, along with trying to figure out how to make a hard surface trail-like. And that's not an easy task. It may sound easy, but it's not. So, but that's the plan and that's the intent. And we've done the analysis and the site work, and so we think the grading will be just right for wheelchair access. Ultimately, in Phase 2, again, we intend to have a large lecture hall, a space we can use to either have lectures or meetings or even conference space, some conference room space, flex space, and a variety of preparation areas. You know, when we have a lot of artifacts coming in and out and putting up exhibits and taking down exhibits, they need to be done in a proper way, and so you need the right kind of space to prepare them, store them, you know, put them back into reasonable shape. So that's kind of the general overview of the plan, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
Just a couple. You're putting the elevator in the rear. Are you going to be creating a ADA parking spot in the back, or?
Well, the ADA parking will be up front.
Okay.
And so it'll merge right into
The trail.
yeah. So you don't need an elevator in the front really, as long as this is graded properly and gets you right to the first level. And then once you're inside, of course, you can kind of go up and down. Okay, I'll ask then John to come up and talk through the site plan.
Thank you.
I have a couple of handouts as well. One is a project fact sheet. It's the same sheet that we handed out the last time, updated with hopefully some answers to questions you have.
Update with
Any
facts.
members of the
Update with facts.
public do? The other handout is probably also familiar to the board members, is the site plan and reduced copies of the site plan and building architectural elevations.
So,
I'm sorry.
Is there another one there?
I think there's more copies of it. I think I have one copy.
Jim, do you have another copy of this?
You just need one more.
Oh, there we go. Okay,
Oh, sets.
large scale of the same plan that's before you. As Steve mentioned, we have a small site, it's under half an acre. Former Methodist Church at 34 Highland Street. We've got 136 feet of frontage on Highland Street. We have 3 abutters other than the university itself, apartments to the west, a commercial laundry to the left rear, and St. Matthew's Church to the north. Property to the east and downhill and across the street are part of the university campus. We'll use the same driveway cut as the church did to access parking on the left side and in the rear. Total of 13 parking spaces, one of which is handicap accessible. The main entrance will remain where the front door of the church was. However, the vestibule of the church was several steps lower than the main floor, and we're going to make that all one level. So there'll be granite steps in front to access the main entry. As Steve mentioned, a ADA accessible curvilinear pathway will be constructed. The university's talking with the Appalachian Mountain Club to help with the rustic appearance to blend with the theme of the museum. The addition on the rear will have the loading dock and elevator that Steve mentioned. That museum will receive deliveries there, mostly via vans or UPS trucks and the like, but once in a while a tractor trailer may be necessary, and we've designed the geometry so that it can back in and out to use the dock. In order to allow that to happen, the grading had to be raised a few feet in order to allow the truck to be reasonably level at the loading dock. This necessitated addition of retaining walls along the west and north property lines. And those walls are up now. Site lighting, we don't have any new pole-mounted lighting, is not required. There is new lighting on the building. One is a security light in the back, and there are also lights at the loading dock and underneath one of the door canopies. Those lights are dark sky compliant, as you talked about last time. There are small lights that will be at the front door and the one staff entry door, which are low intensity. They're not specifically dark sky compliant, but they're not very high wattage. So we feel that they would not be obtrusive and meet the spirit of the idea. Site signage will be pretty straightforward. There'll be a main sign out front, either in the form of a kiosk or something along the front wall. That is still a little bit up in the air as far as what that will finally be. We have the site plan that is before you, that if you had any questions. The main building envelope will remain pretty much as it is, except for the addition that Steve mentioned. Because it is a museum that will store valuable artifacts and documents, the interior air management is very important. Unfortunately, the building was built originally without foundation drains. They did have a minor problem with dampness in the basement, so we had completely ringed the new building with foundation drains to alleviate that issue. It was a little bit costly, but more or less mandatory for the nature of the project. Utility connections are pretty straightforward. Water and sewer will connect to the mains in Highland Street. Power and telecommunications will come via underground duct banks from the university networks in the vicinity of Bagley House. There'll be a pad-mounted transformer, and a pad-mounted chiller on the right, not in the front, but on the right side of the building as you look from the street. Hopefully unobtrusive, and a buried LP tank will be in that vicinity as well. Other than that, the site is, it's small, so we've filled it up with all the things we could fit on the site. Our design team was Barbet Wheelock Architects from Maine as the lead consultant. Our firm, Risfrost Shumway, did all of the engineering, and Yerke's Survey did the boundary survey, and Topo Survey. Bowen Construction Company is the general contractor and hard at work as we speak. Any questions from the board or the public about the site?
Or Steve, I don't know, I understood you're going to perhaps elaborate a little about parking, or have you covered everything that was brought up before? I know that talked about off-site shuttling for events and different mitigation.
We don't believe that the traffic will be significant, and, it's not a building that I think is going to attract 300 people at a time. I think there may be limited events, like the exhibitions that will attract, a certain crowd of people. And if you look forward to February, for example, for the grand opening, school will be in session, our shuttles will be running, and we'll use our own parking facilities to accommodate the need. So we plan to use the shuttle system mostly. In times when the school is out and we have activity over there, obviously parking on our campus won't be a problem. So it's our hope that will be enough to meet the parking need. But we don't believe there's going to be a huge, influx of parking needs, only for those limited times where major exhibitions come in.
And we do have, and the town also has, municipal parking lots and things, so there's certainly enough flexibility to find a solution on a case-by-case basis.
The church has also been very cooperative, and we have an arrangement where we share parking.
Oh, St. Matthew's, you mean?
St. Matthew's,
Yes.
so, we could probably work something out with them, I don't think it's going to be a big problem.
Oftentimes when we have an event as well, when we have an event, we will assign one of the parking lots on campus for the event.
Right, I've seen that. You do a good job, and it's fairly visible, so, right.
Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a question about process here. This is supposed to be a public hearing, and as each speaker gives a presentation, they're looking to the board for responses. Is the public invited to speak now, or are we going to look for public input after?
I think after their last presentation, then we'll open it up.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Lewis.
Given, both the town and the university, have shown great leadership in energy efficiency. Are you incorporating some of that into the design of the building and various components?
I think so. I'm the civil engineer, not the mechanical, electrical, but maybe Ellen or Steve could.
It's being built to meet the standards of sulfur lead certification. We won't be going through the actual process of the certification, but it will be to those standards.
That is also a university, not a policy per se, but it's certainly a goal for all of our buildings is to try to design and apply to meet similar standards. It's very expensive to file a formal certification as we've done before, but many of the design elements are accounted for meeting that standard. And we think we're going to make it.
Great, thank you. That's great.
Yes, Mr. Roach?
In regards to parking, in the past, there used to be stairs from this parking lot down to St. Matthews. We use St. Matthews lot for parking. It's too bad those stairs couldn't be built back into that retaining wall.
Yeah, there was an issue with the easement that would be required to do that.
Yeah.
Which it does not preclude the possibility that it could be restored.
It's a shame, because that lot does sit empty a lot, especially in the evening, if you had events in the evening. The church is only used on Saturday and Sunday, and then I think the hospital uses that parking lot during the work hours, but people would have to walk kind of pretty far around.
The place, if it's ever retrofitted in the past, the place for it is back here in that corner now, because the grade, it wouldn't be required to any steps.
Oh, the grade is lower there, yeah.
Be able to be put in without stairs.
Just something to consider.
But that would require a easement on both properties, and a little bit of that rigmarole, so not to preclude it from the future, but it could still be done. It also wouldn't require any alteration of the wall, which is already built, so.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we answered the questions from before, which I think John has touched on. It was the parking, the site lighting, the dark sky compliance, and signage, so if you're all set, I think we're set with that.
Well, at this point, then, we'll open it up to the public. It is 7:02, and if there is anyone from the public that would like to speak in favor of the application or the applicant? Yes, state your name and...
Jeff Theron. I represent the two apartment buildings, the one at 38 Highland and 49 Langdon. I'd just like to point out that we did have one concern in reference to our properties with the university. I'd just like to thank the university for meeting with us. They did meet with us a couple times. We are moving forward on a resolution to it, and just wanted to make that public that we work together on it, and look forward to the solution when it happens. Thank you very much for meeting us.
Can I just ask, what was the concern?
Snow removal for our two buildings. Tight parking lot, and snow is difficult for us. We now have a skid steer to remove snow, so that's getting better for us, but it was primarily snow removal. It wasn't a major thing, but, you know, for us with our students, it's difficult to move vehicles and get rid of snow, so we're getting better at it. So that was really our biggest thing, and like I said, they're working with us to make sure we keep resolving that.
Mr. Miller?
I stand in support of the Plymouth Museum. My question is, in your marketing plan, what did you find out as far as what I call demographics? Your customers, the number of people who show up on a daily basis, and you were talking here a few minutes ago about coordinated parking of groups that would come here on a known basis, but as Main Street has Chamber of Commerce, we have the unadvertised special, and people would come to Plymouth, not as a group and not registered to go to that museum. I'm curious as to what you anticipated numbers of people you plan, or what is average for this type size museum for drawing X number of people per day.
If I could answer that question, I would be, yes, I'd be very rich. It's like asking how many people are going to attend a theater event. If you do a great one, a lot of people come. If it's less great, fewer come. We're going to have some shows that are going to be more popular than others. We're going to have times when skiers are up here and, believe it or not, are looking at no snow, and they're going to want to go to the museum. There's so many factors in terms of what our audience is. At this point, everyone knows this.
Are there any more comments in support? Yeah. Those then in opposition to the application? Okay, any of those, a general statement? Mr. Gould?
I think it was a great group for the university to work with, and we are interested to turn this to the town floor. As to attendance, you build it and they will come. That's really what applies here. One quick question. Is the interior space is basically one level as far as the visitor platform is concerned?
In phase one, it's for exhibitions, it's entirely one level. In phase two, for exhibitions, it's entirely one level. It's in phase two that we put the auditorium downstairs, and we start with more public access. Public access in phase one is just to take the elevator down to the bathrooms.
Thank you.
Well, at this point then, we will close the public hearing at 7:07 and bring it back to the board. Yes, Mr. Kelly.
I'd like to make just one comment in this. I'd like to congratulate the construction crew, because if I was working those big machines there, you'd have a swath about a half a mile wide.
It's pretty
I'm
tight.
amazed at what they're doing with those big things. I'm utterly amazed.
We'll pass that on to the general.
Thank you.
What would the board like to do at this point? If there's no more comments, there's been a suggestion that we could possibly do a non-binding vote in support or non-support.
Well, there's no approval per se needed, but if the board felt amongst itself that they wanted to put forth a motion to support or whatever, I mean, you know, it's purely philosophical at this point.
Mr. Wilson?
A question again about process. If we are to take a vote, do we have a quorum here this evening?
Yes.
This constitutes a quorum?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So if someone would like to make a motion, a non-binding motion?
Or not, as the case may be.
Or not.
I mean, it's
I think they can
simply...
see that there's a lot of support here from the board.
I'd make a motion to endorse the project. I mean, from my perspective, it sounds like, I mean, you've heard some of our concerns, you've taken concerns of neighbors and other neighborhood individuals, and it sounds like you're addressing everything. It is a tight site. You know, in an ideal world, if you had a lot more parking, maybe more people would show up. I know it's hard to say, but, you know, I think it's a great project.
All right, so we have a motion.
I second.
non-binding.
I second the
Seconded by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we have a unanimous, non-binding support. from
That's the best you can hope for in government, you know?
Thank you very much for coming out here. Dan.
Appreciate it very
Good
much.
presentation.
Thank you, guys.
You better be, because I almost appropriated it last time. Thank you very much for coming. Steve, I'll be in touch with you about master plans and other things, so thank you very much.
So that brings us to item number 5, correspondence.
No, as always, I have a little paper, but it's nothing that you haven't seen before. This is, it's just a reminder on the change of dates for stuff.
Any unfinished or other business?
Not at this particular venue, no.
Public comments?
Another nice meeting.
All right. So I will invite a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second.
Second.
Wilson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Meeting is done at 7:09.